Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 56th episode of Crime Over Wine, the only podcast with head-scratching true crime stories that are just better over a bottle of wine. I'm your host, Liam Collins, and my guest co-host this week was my guest co-host on my very first episode. My guest co-host this week is Claire Mollet. Hello, Claire.
Hi, Liam. I'm so excited to be back. It was such an honor to be your first guest, and I'm so happy to be back. It's crazy. I can't believe it.
So I have to say, and one of the reasons why I covered this case on my very first episode was because every time that that I meet someone new who just started listening to the podcast, they listen from the very beginning, and they are so floored by the Ray Rivera case, which is an insane case, obviously. But I have to say though too that they loved you and your input, and us going back and forth, and so y'all are in for a treat for round 2 for sure. But yeah, I mean, listen, if you haven't listened to episode 1, first of all, how did you even get to episode 56? But go all the way back and listen to the very first episode of Crime Over Wine, because I still that case still keeps me up at night to this day.
It does, me too. I cannot wrap my mind around it, and I'm so glad to hear everyone loved our episode. I want to give a huge congratulations to you, Liam. I can't believe I shouldn't say I can't believe, but it's just incredible how
I know.
Far this podcast has come, and I absolutely love it. So
I know, and you know what's crazy is because again, when we first started this podcast, and it was for the first up until very recently, right? It was just my really close friends, my really close family who were listening to it on a regular basis, and then recently I started realizing and noticing that people who I had no connection to were suddenly listening to the podcast. And so shout out to everyone in the Crime Vineyard, because it has grown so much. We're doing a lot of good things, which is really what this podcast is all about. It's all about, giving back and giving voices to people and doing good. And we're doing that. So cheers to us. And you helped start that. So thanks, Claire.
Thank you, Liam. Seriously, I don't think anyone else could pull this off better. The amount of research
thanks.
that goes into it is awesome. It's incredible.
Well, thank you. You're the bomb. Let's celebrate that with a bottle of wine.
Perfect.
Let's do it. So this week we are drinking 7 Moons Red Blend. It celebrates the phases of the moon with 7 enticing flavors that reveal a smooth, fruity, easy to drink wine with notes of dark berry, cherry, raspberry, mocha, baking spice, vanilla bean, and coffee. And so again, red blend wine that we're talking about here, not usually typically the kind of thing we are drinking on Crime Over Wine, because we usually stick with the named wine brands, I suppose. I don't know what word you call that. So this is, so we're interested in seeing how this is going. Do you typically drink red blends at all, or?
I do. I love red blends, but I'm kind of a Pinot Noir snob. I have to say that's my favorite varietal, but the description of this one sounds really good, and I have been holding off taking a sip until we do it together, because I think last time I just went for it and kind of ruined the surprise.
I do remember that. I actually distinctly remember, going to Cheers and yours already being drank out of, which, listen, I respect 100%.
I just couldn't make it. This smells so good. It is torture. So
yeah, I am very excited for this. Well, I'm going as fast as I can here, Claire. To get
come on. Clock is ticking. It's after 5.
Right. Claire Mollet is the only person who can beat me to a glass of wine. I feel pretty confident saying that. So that it takes a special person for that. So cheers to you, Claire. Thanks so much for coming
Liam.
on.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Very fruity. Oh, very smooth. Oh,
I really
okay.
Like it. First you get
the vanilla bean.
First you get the whoa, now I just got the coffee. You get the fruit.
Yeah.
And then you get some of the vanilla and baking. And then at the very end, I got that strong mocha.
Coffee. Yep, you're so right.
Good.
The mocha in the back of the mouth, the coffee in the back of the mouth for sure. It's very fruit forward. Lots of dark berry, cherry, raspberry, all that's very much so in the front of the mouth. But then it's kind of interesting because, let me take another sip because I need to figure out a way to describe this. Because it's like a whole experience too, for sure. Because it's the fruits in the front, and then you get a little in the middle with the I feel like the vanilla bean, the baking spice, all the way in the back, way back in the back of the mouth, you get coffee and mocha.
Yeah,
and I feel like that's kind of the order of operations here.
I'm getting the same thing, and then if you kind of smell it as you drink, there's a little bit of an earthy aroma. Honestly, this is so
You're right.
This is so good, and it was
Yeah,
really affordable. And I
very true.
love like any red wine that has a tart cherry on the forefront is
Yeah,
like my
right.
favorite thing. But
Yeah. Yeah, I usually don't again, everyone knows I usually don't go for fruity wines. I do like a smooth red for sure.
mm-hmm.
But I don't go for blends. This I am really thoroughly enjoying it, which is kind of surprising me honestly because it's usually even just tasting it's not the kind of wine that that I usually drink or like. But this one though, I am feeling like all of those flavors are coming together very
Yeah,
very nicely in a great experience.
I haven't had one that's like such a complete experience without
Correct. Yeah.
like being overbearing. It's so good.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's a very good balance.
Mm-hmm.
You're definitely right about that because sometimes you have all those flavors and it really just takes up a whole lot of space in your mouth. That's not the case here.
No, it's so good. It's like almost refreshing at the same time, which is anyway
Yeah,
very
yeah.
interesting.
Well, speaking of refreshing things, Claire, the case that I have for you this week, not refreshing.
Okay.
Weird transition, but very, very true though.
Yeah.
I have to tell you a story that just doesn't sound very fair, frankly. The circumstances that surround this investigation seem to be right there, but there is so much that we just don't know still that make for a really frustrating outcome. So get ready.
Okay.
This week, I want to tell you the story of Alonzo Brooks and the ride home. In 2004, Alonzo Brooks was 23 years old and was a classic mama's boy. He was the youngest of 5 kids, and he was the good child. Just a really good energy, really social and easy to get along with, and pretty mild-mannered, and had a really great sense of humor, too. He was known to be the prankster of the family. He was always playing just really well-meaning jokes on anyone he was able to, just that kind of guy, Claire.
Mm-hmm.
Alonzo, or Zoe as the people who loved him called him, grew up in Topeka, Kansas, but moved to Gardner, Kansas not too long before 2004. Now, Gardner is a small city, large town kind of place about 30 minutes southwest of Kansas City, basically a suburb of the large Midwestern city. But it's far enough removed that it's still fairly rural, or at least close to the rural parts of Kansas. So on April 3rd, 2004, Zoe and the rest of his friends had heard of some parties going on in Lacine, Kansas, which is about an hour south of Gardner and a very rural part of the state, and it's not very particularly racially diverse either. But it wasn't the area of the state that Zoe's family was kind of surprised to hear that Zoe wanted to go to for this party, but instead it was the fact that Zoe wanted to go at all. Because as social as he wasn't really one to, be at parties, specifically not with people he didn't really know all that well. He did know his friends really well, but to be clear, but not the people actually throwing the party or the people who were going to be there, at least from a large standpoint.
That's interesting. I mean, especially not even knowing who's throwing the party. Like, it just makes me wonder if there was, I'm waiting to hear, like, something else enticing him.
Yeah.
I also just want to quickly say the nickname Zoe is adorable and I love it.
Yeah, and they exclusively call him that too. Every time that they mention him too. So we're going to be calling him that quite a bit in this podcast as well. But yeah, I mean, so again, and somebody's typical behaviors, right? Really, really important. But in this type of situation, right? He was young. He was hanging out with his friends. It doesn't really seem like that much of a stretch to me, anyways. That
Right.
you hear about a party and regardless of who's throwing it, sure, I'll show up.
Yeah, let's go. I mean, if my family heard of me going to some random party, they'd be like, what is going on?
Yeah, correct. Who's dragging you there, or do they have a gun to your head? Yeah, that's fair. Definitely me too. And but again, so even to the point where the way that they described Zoe was, that even at family parties, he was kind of just one to hang out in the corner, on the hug the wall kind of thing, and just stand there to watch everything kind of happen. He wasn't really much to be in large groups of people all that much, which I don't really know how much I believe that, frankly, only because like of what kind of we're about to talk about with kind of what goes on at the party. Because again, like as much as you want to believe that you like know like your son or your brother or your like close, you know, family member, you don't really know them, right? Like you know them in your context of your family. You don't know them what they're like around like they're really close friends who like are kind of wild, you know?
Right, especially when you're at a party.
Right.
So, all right. Well, I'm excited to hear what happens next.
Yeah, well, you know, Zoe was going to the party with 3 friends, and they take 2 cars total to make the hour-long drive down to Lacine. Now, Zoe was not driving. He actually got a ride from a friend who said that he was going to drive Zoe back from the party, too. And the reason why this arrangement kind of came about was because Zoe, you know, couldn't drive, actually. According to reporting from Kansas City Magazine, he just never learned how to drive. He never had any need or interest in doing so, never had a license. But, you know, either way, regardless of why he never had a license, Alonzo and the 3 friends get into their cars and drive the hour-long drive to Lacine into this house. Now, a little bit about this house, though, Claire. It's kind of important, I think. Okay. It's actually at a farmhouse that the people who are throwing the party are renting. And it's on this pretty big property that backs all the way up to like this really small creek stream kind of situation. When the guys show up to this house, there are about 100 people there, apparently, according to some reporting. But the guys later say in an episode of Netflix's Unsolved Mysteries that they think it was probably more like 50 to 60, but neither here nor there, I suppose. Point being, 50, 100, a lot of people.
Yeah.
The people who are going to this party reportedly range in age from 16 to 25-ish and are mostly from the town surrounding Lacine. But there are actually a good amount of people from Gardner, where the guys are from. But Gardner, again, is slightly more of an urban-suburban area, whereas Lacine is more of a rural space. So the guys and the rest of the people at this party, you know, from Gardner are, you know, pretty much sticking out like a sore thumb pretty much right away. And again, I'm not totally sure about like what the connection was, like who knew who at the party. Like, I don't really totally understand. I'm assuming that at least one person from this group knew somebody who was throwing the party. Don't totally 100% know though. But, you know, Zoe is sticking out even more so, right? And, you know, Alonzo is on the older end of the scale for this crowd for sure. And his friends are even slightly younger than him by about a year or two. But Alonzo is also one of the only few people of color at this party. According to law enforcement, Alonzo is one of only 3 black men at this entire party of anywhere from 50 to 100 people.
Okay. Well, so does that seem to be a problem among the people throwing the party? Did he feel uncomfortable?
Well, you know, it's not totally clear if it is for the people throwing the party. And again, to be honest, like, we never actually even really get total clarity around who those people even are exactly. But it's definitely an issue to someone, Claire. But we're going to get back to that a little bit later on, so definitely hold that thought. Okay. But the party goes on. Everyone seems to be having a really good time, especially Alonzo. Even, you know, everyone is mingling, playing drinking games, having an overall good time, which, again, is kind of what we were talking about before about, you know, how I don't really know if I 100% believe what the family is saying about his, you know, ability to interact in a large group of people, because he doesn't really seem to be having much of a problem based on these stories that I'm hearing and reading about. Concerning this party. So take that with a grain of salt, I suppose. But, you know, at some point that good time takes a bit of a turn for the worse, because one of Alonzo's friends ends up having his back toward Alonzo, chatting away, when suddenly he hears Alonzo getting into it with some other guy at the party. As this friend tells Netflix's Unsolved Mysteries, the friend turns around just in time to see it get physical between the 2 guys. The friend, along with some other partygoers, break it up, separate the 2 guys, and the party goes on. Everyone goes about their separate ways.
Interesting. I mean, I've definitely seen like 2 guys get into it at a party before, and then you're like, okay, well, we just move on. But I'm guessing that's not going to be the case here.
Right. Well, actually, kind of it is, Claire. Okay. At least, and there's a little bit of, you know, murkiness around how this fight kind of came around and what kind of happened about it. But we have a theory a bit, so hold that thought. We're gonna pick that right back up a lot later on. But to your point, though, like, again, like, everyone just kind of like goes about their business, and so like everything's kind of cool. Again, kind of a weird situation, because like if I saw a fight happening at a party, I would probably leave, but like that's just me, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I probably, honestly, if it cleared up, I'd be like, all right, well, whatever. But maybe it's a good idea to leave.
yeah. I mean, I don't know. It just escalates at some point.
Yeah, it depends how bad it is and what it's about, I guess. So
yeah, that's fair. But about an hour into the party, the friend who drove Alonzo to the party, which again is like, it's kind of confusing, and we're not using names because I don't really feel like we have to, in my opinion. But it's a different friend than the one who saw the fight break out, that a totally different person, but the same friend who drove Alonzo to the party. So 3 friends, we're talking about at this point, 2 different friends.
Okay.
That friend, the one who drove Alonzo to the party, ran out of cigarettes and decided that he was going to go get some at a local store. He even told Alonzo what he was going to do and said he was going to be right back. Everything was fine. Alonzo was totally okay with it. But that friend apparently ended up taking a wrong turn to the store. And as he was driving on the gravel roads trying to find this store, he soon realized that he was like totally lost. And then he got stuck actually and was unable to get his car out. So he called up another friend and told him what had happened and asked him if he was going to be able to look out for Alonzo and give him a ride home back to Gardner while he figures out how he was going to get home. Now, the friend apparently agreed to this whole arrangement, according to the friend who got stuck, but it evidently somehow got lost. Probably because of alcohol, sure. But because shortly after the friend had gotten stuck on the road and made that call, a bunch of people hear of a different party, and they leave, including that friend, but they did not end up bringing Alonzo.
Weird. I mean, I have a few thoughts. Like, my first thought was crazy. We're looking back, just a couple decades, and it's like, oh, you couldn't even use Google Maps. Like, if you're lost in the night, you're lost in the night, and that's just, it's just weird how much we've...
Well, and like, even if you did, I would imagine probably not great service, and like, so there's a lot of factors to be had.
Right. And then my other thought was, it's interesting that if his car was stuck, that he wouldn't ask that friend to also come give him a ride somewhere so he could figure it out. Or
I had this same thought, but then I was like, okay, well, maybe, he didn't want to be too much of a nuisance. Maybe he could figure it out. Like, and also like the fact that like guys, right? Like, guys are prideful and like don't want to ask for help. Like, don't want to ask for directions. Don't want to ask for help getting your car unstuck. But I had the same thought. I was like, it feels like maybe come help me.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That's odd. And then obviously the big, obvious red flag at the end is they never brought Alonzo. Like,
right. And again, like, the circumstances here are so murky, right? In terms of like who said what, when, how, you know what I mean? And so, and I don't really know. And like, alcohol's involved, of course. And so that makes everything even more murky.
Right.
But like, so it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me, like how he communicated this plan to the friend and how, if the friend did agree to it, like how it didn't end up getting followed through on. Like, it nothing really makes a whole, like, how did no one get in touch with Alonzo to be like, hey, we're leaving, come on, you know what I mean? And like, it seems as though like the only friend, in my opinion, right, who's like actively looking out for Alonzo and like his best interest, wants to make sure he's okay, leaves and gets stuck. I don't know, it's all just very odd to me.
It is very odd. I would also think that at a big, huge party like that, like, someone else would have cigarettes.
Very good point. Very, very good point.
I don't know.
Yeah, listen, I don't know. I don't have any like specific reason to be like suspicious of this friend necessarily, but this story is odd, right? Like, it's just a weird, like, perfect circumstances. Again, like, we're about to get to what happened to Alonzo, but like the fact that like, whatever happened to Alonzo happened during this perfect set of circumstances doesn't sit well with me.
It's weird, and the fact that it's a lot of drinking going on it's completely true. Like, these people might not have even clearly remembered exactly how all of this went.
Right.
So
Correct. Very good point.
Yeah.
But with all of that confusion and the different groups and the fighting, the rest of the night of the party is mostly pretty blurry and unclear, unfortunately. So, but, the next day comes along and we're back at Alonzo's house now. His family is getting going for the day, and his mother decides to check in to see how he's feeling and see how the party was. But as she creaks into his bedroom, it's totally empty. There's no sign of Alonzo. It looks just as it did before he left for the party. Now, not totally alarming, right? Like, maybe he crashed at a friend's house, but a mother's intuition is unique and sharp. And so, as the day went on with still no word from Alonzo, she starts calling around to his friends to see if they had heard from him, and they all hadn't either. And as they start trading notes, they realize that Alonzo, according to all of these people, had never made it home from the party.
Oh my gosh. That's so terrifying. And the line about, a mother's intuition, That's so true. I just can't imagine how she would feel that day
Mm-hmm.
calling and he never made it home. And
Yeah.
then I'm almost like, did he actually go? But I'm probably getting way ahead of myself.
Yeah. He
He
was there.
would.
He was
Okay.
definitely there.
Okay.
But the friends at this point realized that the plan to make sure Alonzo had a ride back home from the party had fallen through somehow, and they were all just assuming the other one had him, but none of them really did. So after a while of not being able to get in touch with Alonzo and not hearing any news about his whereabouts, the family decides later that afternoon that they're going to drive down to the location of the party to find him themselves. Hello, everybody. It's Liam.
I'm Michelle Herron.
And I'm Heather Hawley. We're the host of Crime Over Wine Weekly, a brand new show keeping you up to date on the latest news in the true crime world.
Every Sunday, we'll share our take on the cases that are making headlines because we know you want to know as soon as we do.
You can find your new true crime and wine obsession now, wherever you get your podcasts. Crime Over Wine is sponsored by BetterHelp. As someone who's used therapy for years, I know that finding a therapist can sometimes be a stress on its own, juggling your full-time job, your family, your friends, your podcast, and trying to find the right therapist on top of that can almost feel impossible. That's where BetterHelp comes in. BetterHelp matches you with a therapist that works for you on your terms. It's online, it's remote, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to one of 33,000 licensed professional therapists in as little as a few days. And because finding a new therapist is a lot like finding a new bottle of wine, if you don't jive with your therapist, you can easily switch to a new one at no additional cost. You can get 10% off your first month of BetterHelp by going to betterhelp.com/crimeoverwine. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/crimeoverwine for 10% off your first month. Join over 4 million people who decided to get help and get happy with BetterHelp. Alonzo's family drove down to the farmhouse where the party was held with pits in their stomachs, not sure what they would find. They made that hour-long drive feeling stressed and worried, and they drove further and further away from the urban areas and out toward the rural farmland where Alonzo was last known to be. And when they showed up to the house, they walked up to the door, gave it a knock, and there was no answer. So they knocked again. Still no answer. So after a few minutes, they walk around the property to see what they could find. They peer into the windows and still find nothing. It was empty, and not even in the way of like whoever lived there just like ditched everything. I mean, it didn't even look like a party had taken place there the night before at all.
Oh my gosh, that gives me chills.
Yeah.
And makes me wonder, was this pre-planned? Like, why did they rent this giant random house and then abandon it?
Yeah. Well, and so what I gathered from this, right? So I have a lot of different thoughts about specifically what you just said there. Because like I read it at first of like a rental as in like someone like a rented house, like you rent an apartment, you rent a house, right? Like that's how I like a long-term rent. And so but then as I was like reading more into it, I was like, okay, am I misunderstanding this? Like, I'm still not totally clear on it. Like, am I misunderstanding this? Like, was this something that you could rent like an Airbnb, like back in the day, right? Like that kind of thing. Like,
Yeah.
is it, like, could they have just rented this house just to throw this party? Is that possible? I mean, I'm sure like it's not rentable like for that purpose, right? But like I'm wondering if they had the capability to do that.
Yeah, that was my initial thought, but I get where you're coming from too, because it is a rural area, so it'd be a weird place to have a vacation rental or an Airbnb. But
yeah, well, and definitely before Airbnb and like that kind of stuff, but like still those existed, you know what I mean? So
yeah,
I don't know. It's just odd. And then again, so the fact that they're just like out like the next day is kind of odd if they were renting this long term.
right.
So I don't know. And like to be clear, so I'm jumping ahead here a little bit, but like I think it's worth it since we're talking about this. So at some point I read that at some point in this whole entire process, that the people who were renting the home were evicted. Like that wording, they were evicted from the house.
Okay.
And so for reasons I'm not totally clear on, it could be maybe because they found out they had this big party. It could be because maybe they found out other things that, again, we're gonna get to, that like brought negative attention to this property. But I can't imagine that any eviction would happen that quickly.
Me either.
Unless it was like super under the table kind of rental. You know what I mean? That's possible.
That makes me wonder. That does sound more like a lease type of renting thing.
Right.
Huh.
Right. Yeah. It's just weird. Again, like the information here is kind of like is very clear in some places and very unclear in other places. And this is just one of those places.
Yeah.
I kind of lean more on that it was like a lease, that it was like something that you had long term. But like, again, then how did you show up to the house and like have everything kind of like, I don't know, it's just odd. But again, like really suspicious and kind of spooked out of their minds. They continue looking around this massive farm property to see if they could find any hints or clues, or more specifically any sign of Alonzo. And they didn't find anything at first, not on the whole property. But again, the more they look and the less they see, the more anxious they get, and the more their inner detectives in them come out. And so they venture to the back of the property toward that creek where the property extends out to. And as they make their way back there and toward the banks of the creek, they see something that catches their eyes, and as just a little bit out of place. It's a pair of shoes. And as they get closer to them, they realize that it's actually a pair of boots. But they're not just any boots. They know without a shadow of a doubt that those boots belong to Alonzo. And not too far from where they find the boots is a hat that they also know that Alonzo had owned.
Oh, spooky. And I just have to say, our first episode, there was a mysterious pair of flip-flops. Now we have a mysterious pair of boots.
Right. You're so right. Yeah. Right. Well, again, like red flag of the century, right? Like you can't get anywhere without your boots. Like you can get anywhere you can get somewhere without your hat, certainly, but like where are you going without your boots? Like, sure, drunk people, again, like let's keep all that in this kind of context, but like you're like, I can't imagine being so drunk that you disappear without
your shoes.
Your boots. So, freaked out entirely, they call the Lynn County Sheriff's Department to try and report Alonzo missing. And they are frustrated, as we all are going to be, when they're told to wait 24 hours to report him missing, that he was likely just, quote, doing what kids do and just walking around, and that they should call back once a full 24 hours had passed since the last time Alonzo had been seen. And they're, irritated by this, like we all are, because there's no way that someone missing their shoes didn't mean that they were in danger, but whatever, the 24-hour mark was just a few hours away by this point, so they wait until then, call back, and the sheriff's department takes the report, and they launch a search and a full-blown investigation into Alonzo's disappearance. They search the full property thoroughly by land using canines, and even end up launching helicopter searches, and they search through that creek, which was really only about 3 feet deep at the absolute most, and like the deepest part of this creek, according to what a leader of the search crew said on that episode of Netflix's Unsolved Mysteries. But as that search continued, the family felt really uneasy about its extent, saying that they were being told that they were doing what they could, but didn't buy that 100%, didn't think that was true. Take that as you may. Families get frustrated by searches all the time, but like for whatever reason, they seem to really think that this was just an inadequate search.
Yeah, that poor family. I mean, obviously we hear this with pretty much every one of these cases, but I don't even know how people get through that, waiting that. And
yeah.
So I completely understand. And yeah, the creek is interesting because you automatically think, oh, maybe he fell in the creek or got thrown in the creek, but 3 feet deep, I can't even imagine it would have like a strong enough current.
No, it's definitely not. No, definitely not. Yeah, and they make pretty clear that they're like we would know if he was in here, and so and they seem to believe pretty strongly that he wasn't, and like for sure, and like again, so we're gonna get to like a part here that like maybe gives a little bit more context into why they don't really think that it was a strong search, but we will get there in a second.
Okay, so like. During this time, what were people saying about Zoe and what could have happened? Like there has to have been like some gossip or chatter.
for sure, gossip was running around this town for sure. But, in the meantime, investigators were questioning Zoe's friends and the people renting the home and others who were known to have attended the party. And throughout this investigation, no one fessed up to anything and no one seemed to know what exactly happened to Alonzo. They do somehow end up substantiating the friend's story about getting stuck on his way to pick up some cigarettes, or at the very least, they had no reason to question it necessarily. Again, I'm side-eyeing that slightly, but they're the experts, I suppose. But they do actually start hearing some things about that fight that I told you about, Claire. And they do also hear something about some goings on at the party that may have led to that fight. Investigators hear that Alonzo was seen flirting with a white woman at the party. Now, they were never able to fully identify her or really share anything about her, but it is possible that that somehow contributed to this fight, where apparently, as investigators are now learning, a racial slur was said to Alonzo.
Oh, okay. I was hoping that wasn't the path we were going down, but unfortunately, it sounds like it might be. Oh.
Yeah, well, and again, so the racial undertone here is pretty strong, right? Because they make very clear that, of the 100 people at most that are at this party, 3 of them are black, and they bring this up. And so again, I hate to stereotype here, but rural area of middle America, right? And so the stereotype is a stereotype because it at some point is true, right? And so so the point being is, so there was some friction, and so and two, I have to say, a black man from a more urban part of the country, right? Probably, at the very least, drew out the ugly side of the ugliest person, right? Certainly.
Right. And who knows if he was hitting on this woman or not, but that's just a recipe for disaster between any 2 guys at a party drinking.
Right.
So.
Correct. Yeah, and I don't know if maybe that guy, we don't really know about the other guy who Alonzo was seen fighting with. So we don't really know if that maybe was his girlfriend's, or maybe was some girl that he was trying to flirt with also. It's very unclear.
Yeah. I'd be nervous if I was the guy who got in a fight with him and then he went missing.
Fair, right? I mean, suspect number 1.
Yeah.
Certainly. Yeah. I mean, unless he had something to do with it, which then it makes sense.
Right.
But, a month went by since the night of the party. And at some point after that, the people who were renting the home, again, like we were talking about, had been evicted for reasons that aren't totally clear. Maybe to do with the party, maybe to do with the fact that the house was now ground zero of a missing person search, maybe something else. Again, who really knows? But also at some point in the month after the search began, the official searches had waned down, much to the dismay and frustration of the family, who were confident that there was some clue of what had really happened to Alonzo on the property. They just hadn't found it yet. And so about a month after the night of the party, on May 1st, 2004, the family decides to organize their own search. They get permission from the police and the property owners to conduct their own search, and about 50 volunteers had shown up to support it. They get into formation and start searching the property, and just under an hour into the search, they make a horrific discovery.
Hello, Crime Over Wine listeners. I am Rachel.
And I'm Heather.
We are the hosts of Like Mother, Like Murder.
We bring you the good, the badass, and the crime.
Each week, we bring you stories from missing and murdered
to survivors and women who empower you.
And of course, some mom talk sprinkled in.
Check us out wherever you get your podcasts at Like Mother, Like Murder.
And give us a follow on social media so that we can say hi.
Okay, love you, bye.
Okay, love you, bye.
Get ready for that big test with Study.com. Study.com offers learning materials and test prep, even LSAT study prep guides for all of my legal nerds listening. Unfortunately, there aren't any wine study guides, and believe me, I did check. Listeners can get 30% off their first 3 months of any subscription level using the promo code CrimeOverWine. Again, that's promo code CrimeOverWine, no spaces, for 30% off your first 3 months at Study.com. Learn faster, stay motivated, study smarter with our sponsor, Study.com. All right, Claire, how's your wine tasting?
Oh, delicious. Nothing goes better with a good unsolved crime story than a good glass of wine, as you
Yeah.
are an expert in.
That's fair. I am not an expert in a whole lot of things, but wine. Well, I don't want to say wine. Crime and wine. One of the things that I feel like for sure. Yeah,
You hear
well,
about
that was
food
kinda weird.
pairings, but this is.
Correct. Yeah, different kind of pairing for sure. No, but it's actually kind of mellowing out a little bit. And kind of what we're talking about at the beginning of the episode, where like I feel like the differentiation of flavors was pretty distinct. I'm actually kind of getting them mixed up a lot, which is kind of interesting. I'm not really getting them as distinctly in the front, middle, and back of the mouth as much.
I could kind of see what you mean, and I was just kind of thinking it was because I had never tasted it before, and now I'm getting a little bit more used to it. But I think you're kind of right. I wonder if there's some science behind that.
Yeah, well, that's part of the aeration process, right? That's why you let your wines breathe, is because then it allows the oxidation to kind of smooth out a lot of the flavors, like round out the edges, almost kind of think about it that way.
Okay.
So it actually does make a decent amount of sense. And so that's kind of why I like not letting my wine aerate as much, because I like kind of experiencing both. And eventually kind of getting to, because you get a lot more of those distinct flavors if you like the second you open it.
Okay.
And so I like kind of letting it, like seeing what it's what it tastes like when you first open it versus what it's actually supposed to taste like, and kind of seeing that transition over.
Wow. I mean, as much as I've drank wine, I have never I knew about aerating, but I never really actually took the time to sit and see what the difference was. I just know that this is really easy to drink, and I am trying to take it slow because I could probably drink this.
That's fair. No, it's a tasty one for sure, and it's very easy to drink too, which is which I feel like for reds, specifically, I feel like red blends, like it's like one of the ones where you want to sip on. This is one I'm like taking big gulps, but it could also be you, Claire. It could also be you, or this case.
It could be the week I've had plus this case.
Very fair. It could also be. It could be definitely the case for sure, because I feel like I need more wine to like make sense of this thing.
Right. It's almost like a nervous reflex. What's
a little bit. I mean, not that I need an excuse for it, but you're definitely not wrong about that. Let's dive back into it, because right before we left, the search was really kicking up, and they found something.
The horrific discovery. Yes. Oh my god.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, again, just to reiterate, less than an hour into the family-driven search for Alonzo, they find him in a brush along the banks of the creek, dead. He had lost his boots, and that signature hat he was always known to wear was gone too.
Oh my gosh. That is a horrific discovery. I mean, I guess the search is over, but you have so many remaining questions.
Well, and again, like to find like by his family, who like really like it's not their jobs to organize a search, right? And so like sure you do it because you feel like you have to, but like they shouldn't have had to, right? Because it really should be the investigators and the search crews, the professionals.
Yeah, they found that in an hour after the search crews are saying there was nothing. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is a little ridiculous. Well, yeah, and again, it puts a little bit of credence into what they were saying before about, like, we don't think that the search is adequate enough. Well, here's your proof. These amateurs and volunteers found what you spent a month looking for. They found it in less than an hour.
Right.
So I see why they're mad, right? At least on the surface level, right? Because it's like we had to do this our freaking selves because you guys weren't doing their jobs from their perspective.
Yeah, that's awful. Like I'm like, they have police dogs. The dog should have found that. I don't know anything. Well, but it doesn't make sense.
Well, and again, keep this all we are going to talk about all this toward the end of the episode because there's a good bit to discuss here. So definitely, but keep this detail in your back pocket. Definitely hold it because we are going to bring it back for sure. But the family, from their perspective, right, like heartbroken, confused about how Zoe could have been missed by trained professionals who had allegedly searched this area thoroughly multiple times. He was down a bank near a creek, sure, but he wasn't really well hidden at all. Plus, investigators had said that they searched the creek several times, right? So at this point, they had become their own investigators, frankly. So they had to somehow find the courage to take their own photos of the scene, including Alonzo's dead body. body and to look around the area for any more clues.
Oh my gosh, that's awful.
Yeah.
After seeing that. Oh.
Yeah. And again, like this is not something like this is not their job, but like, and so think about how it must feel to like feel like you have to do this if you want to investigate my son's death, right? I'm gonna do it myself. Like what? Like imagine having to feel that way.
Yeah, I can't imagine that range of emotions and anger and frustration and devastation. That's awful. Right. So what did the police have to say about how they could have missed him?
Well, they simply said that they just missed him, Claire. Like, that's all. But there are some really intriguing theories about this later. Again, I've been saying this all episode. Hold that thought. Okay. We're going to talk about it. But the family does call in investigators to come in and survey the scene on their own. They don't find much direct evidence near the scene, at least nothing they discuss publicly. But they do make some pretty interesting findings when it comes to Alonzo's autopsy. The medical examiner didn't find any physical injuries on Alonzo, no penetrating wounds that would indicate he was stabbed or shot, and there weren't any bruises either, which would have indicated he had been beaten to death or maybe fell and died. In fact, the autopsy specifically notes that the medical examiner doesn't believe he had been beaten up or fell at all. Similarly, too, there wasn't any water in his lungs, which would have been a telltale sign that he had drowned. Now, the medical examiner doesn't rule that out, though, entirely as a cause of death, but simply says that there were no signs of it. Lastly, and possibly most importantly, at least in my opinion, most of the soft tissue around his neck had decayed significantly and been damaged by animals and insects because of how long he had been out there. That made it hard to tell if he had been possibly strangled, so their options are slimming and slimming and slimming. So the medical examiner says that they are not able to determine a cause of death, and therefore they couldn't determine a manner of death either. They label both of those as undetermined on the autopsy.
Oh my gosh. I can't imagine that frustration's not even the right word, but how that would feel after having to find the body yourself and then they're like, it's undetermined. What about, like, had they done, like, toxicology, like poison or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm sure they did, right? I mean, again, they would have, I'm sure if they found poison in him, they would have reported that. But which is, again, interesting because there are, again, as we know, like a lot of, drugs that won't even show up in an autopsy, or in a toxicology. And so toxicology reports, I kind of take with a grain of salt, right? Because, and there are also like a lot of chemicals that like show up that I'm like, yeah, no doubt, but like, like it still could be signs of something else. So it's kind of complicated. I don't really know how much I love toxicology reports, if we're being honest. And well, whatever, I'll get on that soapbox another day. But but to your point though about the frustration, right? About how, if you have to do everything, yourself and you still don't even get really the full answers. And also again too, if you're going off the assumption here that he was just missed and like, you're going off of the frustration that, this was not a thorough search. This was not a thorough investigation, of this property. And you're now telling me on the back end of this that that he's been out there for too long to determine how he died.
Well, that's true. I'd be so mad, and I'd be like, well, I feel like the investigators didn't try that hard, and so I feel like now the medical examiner just isn't trying that hard either. Like it's just I could not live with that undetermined. Like, no.
Sure. Well, now investigators do say something really interesting, though, Claire, about the circumstances surrounding Alonzo's death. Now, they can't really do much considering the medical examiner's undetermined ruling, right? Like, that really ties investigators' hands. But they do say publicly that they do suspect foul play. But they fall short of calling his death a straight-up homicide. And they add that the circumstances were, quote, very suspicious.
And I wonder what they meant by that, especially if everything is undetermined, yet they suspect foul play.
Well, it could be because of the fights from the party, potentially, and the fact that there was someone at the party who clearly didn't like him because of the color of his skin, but, it's not officially clear on any documentation. But while investigators don't clear that up publicly, what the family says may provide a bit of a clue into that. It comes actually from Alonzo's brother, who was there when the family and volunteers found his body on May 1st. And based on what Alonzo told reporters, he seemed to be side-eyeing the circumstances surrounding Alonzo's death death beyond the obvious reasons. To him, his brother's body didn't seem to be as decomposed as it should have been. Now, as far as I can tell, Zoe's brother, is not a trained pathologist or investigator or what have you, so take this as you will. But the point is that the assumption to the average person here is that Alonzo was in the creek for a certain amount of time and then washed up on shore at some point, right? But in his opinion, the state of his body doesn't support that necessarily. It seemed to be pretty well preserved and didn't look as though it had been in water for a prolonged period of time or even outside of the elements all that time either, especially considering search crews said up and down that they had searched every single inch of the property, including that creek.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's interesting because I've kind of briefly had the same thought back when you were saying that it was, not clear if there had been any strangulation because of some decomposition of the body. But I feel like after that long, I mean, again, I don't know, but I just feel like after that long, you'd be like pretty decomposed, or especially if there's water involved. So that is interesting.
Well, and so again, like, you have to like take it with the perspective of like, this is like someone who's like already suspicious of the investigation, right? So like from that perspective, but also someone who like doesn't really have, as far as I can tell, like any trained background here. Right. And so like, take that as you may, but like I also feel like if he felt that enough to say it, then that is probably at least semi-obvious.
Yeah, because if it wasn't, you'd just sound like you were just making it up. But
right.
So if they don't think he was where he was that whole time, did they have any thoughts as to where he might have been instead?
Well, there is actually this really interesting theory that is based pretty much entirely out of rumors around town, Claire. But it's important to note here that in this episode of Netflix's Unsolved Mysteries, the leaders of the search crews even give the questions surrounding his location for that whole time a little bit of air. The search crew member says that he's not sure Alonzo was in the water either. Again, this is like a really small creek, 3 feet deep at its deepest point, and he seems to be pretty convinced that if he was in the water at the time, that they would have found him because the current, wasn't all that strong to move him significantly. And he said the rainfall wasn't such that it would have risen levels to put him up in the banks either all that much. So like, what happened? So that gives life to a lot of town rumors, as you can imagine, about Alonzo's death. But one in particular really takes off. It's this theory that Alonzo was in fact not in that brush for that whole month, but instead was moved there afterwards. And the town floats that they believe it's possible he had been frozen in the meantime.
Frozen?
Frozen. This theory really takes off, around Lacine. And interestingly, the coroner that does the autopsy says it's possible. But to be clear, doesn't say whether he does or does not believe it to be true. He says in that episode of Netflix's Unsolved Mysteries that the state of Alonzo's body was consistent with being near the creek for about 30 days. But he says it's possible that he could have been in there for less time than that. Now, here's where the coroner gives this theory some room. He says that there would have been some pretty crystal clear evidence found on someone who had been frozen immediately after their body thaws. But after a while, that evidence ends up going away, and there's no proof left that the body was ever frozen.
Weird. Interesting. I mean, then that would, change the thought of, well, why didn't the police find him? I mean, maybe he wasn't there.
Well, and so there's a couple different thoughts around this, right? And we're gonna talk about this a lot right here. So hold on to your glasses for sure, because I have a lot to say. But so there, to your point, right? If he wasn't there, right? If the whole time the investigators and the search crews were looking for him, he was not where he ended up being found. There's this thought around, okay, well then, if he was actually moved there afterwards, after the search had ended in some way, shape, or form, how long had he been sitting there? And I would be curious to know, how long it would have taken for those, for that evidence to, be non-existent. I would imagine it probably fluctuates depending on what it is. But, point being is, so, because it didn't really, not a whole lot of time had passed. Mm-hmm. And so, it didn't really seem as though, there was enough time for him to thaw considerably, unless he had been unfrozen, and then moved there. So point being is that doesn't really seem to line up. But then there's also this other part of like some doubt cast on like the property owners / the people renting the property, because basically, so if you remember, like way back, this was like a kind of a minor detail, but when the family had decided that they were going to organize their own search, they asked police for permission. Police gave them permission, but then the police had also asked the property owners, like, hey, like, we're going to do this, like, it's on their property, they still technically have to do that. And so so point being is like the property owners were aware. And so there's like a little bit of doubt, point being around like, okay, like if the property owners were aware, who else was aware? And so like maybe the people who knew Alonzo had been frozen were aware that they were about to do this search. And so, okay, well, now feels like the time to move him to where they ended up finding him. Again, going down this theory that he was moved. I don't really know how, like, what to do with that, because again, like, it's either a very thorough search or it's not. And like, if you're gonna say it's not a thorough search, then like you can't also say that he was moved, in my opinion, because if it wasn't a thorough search, then like that feels like the right answer to say that he wasn't, that he was just missed. But if it was a thorough search, then like that obviously gives a lot more room to that he was moved there at some point, because if you really looked at every single inch of that creek, then the only logical explanation is that he wasn't there.
I would think too, like if they had really thoroughly investigated the area and then he was moved, they would be able to go back and see if there was any evidence of a body being dragged or footprints or something.
Right. Yeah, no, and again, like a period of time had passed, but again, so like I'm assuming that like maybe they have like a week notice if they had any at all, that the search was going to happen. And so I just can't, I don't know, I'm not a scientist, not an investigator, not a medical examiner, but I just can't imagine that if a body, like a whole entire body that had been frozen for like a little less than a month, could have completely thought out, and all that evidence, based on what this medical examiner said about how this would have worked, and all that evidence would have just disappeared in a week.
Yeah, it seems like there would be very clear evidence that it was frozen. Yeah. So is this like frozen theory like a random theory, or did someone know something or try to cover something up with that theory?
Yeah, I don't know. And again, like we're feeding into this strictly off of town rumors, right? Like it's not based off of any kind of physical evidence, but like it would make sense if he was preserved, but like wouldn't make sense if he was, for him to be thawed out. I don't know. I feel like I go in circles with that part, but that I don't know how else what else to make of that, Claire.
Yeah, I mean, would someone preserve better if they were indoors than outdoors? I honestly have no idea. Like you said, I'm not a scientist or a coroner or anything, clearly. So,
yeah, I mean, I would imagine they would preserve better inside, but not much.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's also been a month. I mean, unless here's another thought, like that I never really considered until just now. Like, who's to even say that he died that night? Right? Like maybe he was taken somewhere, like locked in a room. I don't know. That's just
true.
Total random theory. But again, he was decomposed enough for like the skin around his neck to be to have been decomposed, if you remember correctly, by animals and stuff.
So weird.
I don't know.
I thought that they could tell like a basic time of death, but again, what do I know? I mean, that's so true. Maybe he was trapped somewhere. Like, yeah, and then... Well,
so there's this thing called rigor mortis. Once rigor mortis had set in, it basically like it's when your entire body's like done. It's once that sets in, it's like impossible to determine cause of death. You can kind of figure it out, like give like a real rough estimate, but it's not super clear, and certainly more than like rigor mortis sets in, I mean, like in a day, like at minimum. And so yes, certainly rigor mortis had like long passed since then.
Okay.
Yeah, well, those weren't the only rumors flying around Lacine, though, Claire, about Alonzo Brooks' bizarre death. Other rumors revolved around the woman he was seen flirting with, possibly that her boyfriend may have been at the party. Other rumors revolve around Alonzo Brooks' race, that someone or maybe even a lot of people may have had a problem with Alonzo simply because he was black. And investigators actually back that up, saying that they believe this suspicious death may have been racially motivated, but again, they stopped short saying that it was a straight-up homicide. But despite the rumors, the FBI, which had stepped in to lead the investigation just over a month after Alonzo's body was found, had declared the case a cold case, and were now asking for leads to guide further investigative measures. But if those leads ever came, they never led to anything substantive, because months go by from there, and then years, and then more than a decade, Claire. Almost 15 years to the day pass with little to no word about Alonzo's investigation beyond the rumors that had run rampant at this point and then died out around town. In March of 2019, the Kansas Bureau of Investigation, which was supporting the FBI in this investigation, released a statement about Alonzo's death, saying that there was, quote, no evidence that Alonzo was the victim of a crime and that the case was closed.
That's weird. Like, exactly 15 years later and random. Like, that sounds like something prompted them to say that. Why would they just close it?
Well, it kind of, to be clear, they said that it had been closed. Like, they didn't just close it that day, that it was a closed case is what they said. But, it's likely because, they start hearing that a powerhouse had started to poke around Alonzo's case. A powerhouse by the name of Netflix. Crime Over Wine is proud to support Emancipet. Unlike episodes of Crime Over Wine, veterinary care shouldn't be a mystery, which is why Emancipet is making vet care affordable and accessible to everyone. Emancipet is a nonprofit organization that operates an ever-expanding network of low-cost veterinary clinics in neighborhoods across the country, offering discounted and free vaccines, flea and tick treatments, spay and neuter surgeries, and much more. Learn more and support Emancipet's mission at emancipet.org. Alonzo's family had said that around 2017 to 2018, they had gotten a call from producers with Unsolved Mysteries, which was rebooting the show on Netflix. That clearly moved the needle for investigators because more than a year after that statement, the FBI announced that they had reopened the case, citing new leads and renewed interest in the case thanks to the impending release of that episode of Unsolved Mysteries.
Wow. Okay, so the leads were a result of the episode.
It was a result of talk that there was going to be an episode on the just strictly based off of his name coming back up in around town. The episode had not even released yet.
Ooh, that's interesting. So what were these leads?
Well, they don't talk a lot about what all of those leads were, Claire, but they do say that they learned about something that they hadn't heard of 15 years ago. And it was a totally separate party that had started before the party that Alonzo went to. Now, I'm not totally clear if Alonzo and his friends went to this party, but apparently at that party, a fight had broken out, sending a group from that party to the farmhouse where Alonzo and his friends were. And so as a result of learning this new information, investigators start asking people from that second party to come forward to give information about who was there and what had happened throughout the night. Interestingly, too, in the process of reinvestigating Alonzo's case, they also said that they were indeed investigating whether or not Alonzo had been murdered.
All right, so that would be kind of like the first time they were daring to tiptoe around the word homicide.
Yeah, pretty much, right? They kind of said, again, they said foul play. Mm-hmm. They said that that the circumstances were suspicious, but they definitely never said straight up murder until now, right?
Yeah.
Again, 16 years later just about. So that's kind of where we're at.
It also, and I could be completely wrong here, but just the initial feeling I get when I hear that there was word going around town that Netflix was working on this episode, and then there's leads coming in, I get a red flag that's is someone trying to cover up their tracks now?
What do you mean?
Is somebody nervous that now this case is going to get all this attention again and people are going to start looking into what happened, and so they want to control the stories. They're worried about getting caught for something.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily put it past, like, you know, again, like someone who has enough influence to get away with this kind of thing in a crowd of 100 people, ish, right? Like to also have the influence to, you know, guide the narrative when his name all of a sudden comes back up in the news.
Yeah. I mean, I have no idea what's going to happen, so I'm probably speaking way out of turn, but I'm just like,
no, that's
it sounds
fair.
like a perfect opportunity to be like, oh no, this like other group of people from some other party showed up.
Right. Oh, yeah. No, that's a good point, though. Right. Like, all of a sudden, there's, like, this new group of people that, like, nobody can get in touch with.
Right.
That's such a good point.
Yeah.
No, that's such a good point. Yeah, right. And, like, nobody seems to know who these people are. Right. Yeah, so true. Yeah.
So, okay. So, anyway, how are they going to reinvestigate whether he had actually been murdered?
Well, you know, just about a month after the FBI announced that they had reopened Alonzo's case, investigators announced that they were going to exhume his body. Again, you know, a pretty significant move. We don't see that all that often in the grand scheme of things, but it was probably important for them to do that because apparently, Claire, there were some serious concerns about the validity of Alonzo's original autopsy.
Okay, so yeah, what are those concerns?
Well, there are actually concerns about the person who actually performed the autopsy. Apparently, the medical examiner has had some issues in the past that force people to side-eye his work at the very least. The medical examiner came to Lacine from upstate New York, where he had been asked to resign for alleged misconduct. Apparently, he had been harvesting organs without family members' permission and had also been improperly storing skeletons in his office. Now, he has never been criminally charged for this, but there are, you know, legitimate sources that say that he was asked to resign in disgrace and ended up moving to Kansas after that scandal, where he got the job in the Lynn County Medical Examiner's office in Lacine, Kansas.
Oh my God, who hired this guy?
Yeah, don't love that, right? And like, again, like this is not like, this is like a separate thing from like mishandling, you know, autopsies, right? But like, so like, it's not, I don't know, like you're weird and this is an odd thing, but like I have no reason to believe, I suppose, that this medical examiner was like doing wrong things when he was like actually performing autopsies, like, and doing reports, like, and again, like, it feels weird even saying that because it's like, obviously he was up to some really weird stuff with bodies, but like, it's not necessary, but like point being is like, it's apples to oranges here a little bit in terms of like misconduct, I feel like. Is that fair to say?
I get what you're saying. Like, what he was doing is not necessarily had anything to do with
a different
like
kind of
changing
messed
cases or facts.
Correct.
And also,
right. If he was like lying on autopsy reports, okay, don't believe this dude. But that's not really what we're talking about.
He was another
here.
Kind of like demented.
Correct.
But I'm this is probably a weird thought to have, but I'm like, you hear harvesting organs and skeletons, and you're like, oh my God! But if
I don't even want to know what he was doing with them. I don't even want to know.
Like, you're around organs and skeletons all the time, so I can't even like compare my life to
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. And again, but like, so like different, but like similar-ish enough, I guess, in terms of like misconduct that you're like, it's fair, I suppose, to raise a flag and give a little side eye to like what he was actually doing and like how legit were his reports. It's fair, like, I think, to that point, right?
Yeah.
Like you at the very least want to like check his work, right?
Right, because that just doesn't sound like someone who's stable, and you don't really want to.
Should not be checking out bodies.
Yeah, exactly.
Nope. You know, but unfortunately, you know, when they did exhume his body, they didn't find anything new. So that ended up being a dead end, Claire. Today, investigators say that they believe someone, likely multiple people, know what really happened to Alonzo. They still want to talk to that woman he was seen flirting with that night and try to identify her, and they still want to talk to anyone who was at that second party that took place before the one Alonzo was at. So if you are any of these people or know someone who is, call the FBI Kansas City office at 816-512-8200. We're also going to put that number in our show notes and on our website. website too, there is a $100,000 reward for information that leads to an arrest. But for now, kind of an abrupt ending here, Claire, but that's all that we have for you. So thank you so much for coming on.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you, Liam, for keeping me up for the next 100 nights wondering what happened.
I mean, like, and like I try to, like, I compare everything back to Ray Rivera, in my opinion. I still think Ray Rivera is just the most, well, actually, Robert Wone has to be probably the most, like, insane, bizarre case that I've ever heard. But Ray Rivera is up there. Like, in terms of, like, yeah, well, and just specifically in terms of, like, how did you die? I feel like Alonzo and Ray kind of similar in that respect, right?
Like they were both found, and then it was like the story of how did this happen. And so I'm so caught up here on the whole thing we were talking about where they never found the body. Was that the investigators overlooking something, purposely overlooking something, or was he really not there? So that's just crazy. These poor people having to live wondering that.
Yeah. And, you know, I go back to kind of how we teed this whole thing up is like, this doesn't seem fair, right? Like, it doesn't seem, it's because it seems as though like if things had been like pretty like thorough enough, like if Lynn County Medical Examiner's Office didn't hire someone who was known to like do weird things with bodies, like maybe we would have a little bit, like we would feel a little bit better about this. Like maybe we still wouldn't know what happened to Alonzo or how all this stuff happened, but we would have a whole lot less questions.
Right.
And so I feel like that would have been a win in my book, right? Like just to like feel a little bit better about this whole thing.
Yeah, and just feel validated and just not like they had to go find this on their own. Like it was just like, it's never going to be found. And they're like, well, it's right here. That would be so invalidating. And at least to just feel like people really like cared when they needed to care, not 15 years later, like when they needed to care. Right. Yeah, that's awful.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm going to repeat that number again one more time. It's the FBI Kansas City office, 816-512-8200. And again, that number is on our website and our show notes. Call in. I mean, if you know anything, or you think you know something, or know someone who knows something, there were a lot of people at that party, right? That's all I have to say.
Right. And those people all know people, and oh my gosh.
Correct.
Yeah.
Small town.
Yeah.
Well, Claire, tell everyone where they can find you and your work online.
All right. Well, how do I even explain it? Right now, I guess you would find most of my work at visitestuspark.com. I moved from the world of news reporting to the world of public relations, and we kind of mix in some on-camera stories with that. But instead of reporting news, I'm talking about elk, and believe it or not, like frozen dead guys. We have a frozen dead man here in Estes Park.
Oh gosh.
We have, but I get to do all kinds of crazy stories. And then I also do work for my dad's production company, the Rocky Mountain Channel. On that end, I get to host fun things like the holiday parade and all kinds of fun stuff. If you check out Nick Mully Productions or the Rocky Mountain Channel or visit Estes Park, you will find some of the stuff I do.
Well, thank you again so much for coming on, Claire, and thank you all so much for listening. We are going to put all of our sources on our website so you can read everything for yourself and probably come up with a few theories too. And if you are just loving this podcast and are just looking for a way to tell everyone and anyone about it, the best way to help people discover this podcast is by leaving us a 5-star rating and a review wherever you are listening right now. So make sure you follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you're wondering what we have in store for you next week, here's a quick sneak peek. Hello, everybody. It's Liam.
And I'm Sam Pena. I'm joining the Crime Vineyard next week with a web of lies and conflicting information that will lead us all to the same question. Where is Marsha Brantley?
You are not going to want to miss this one. There's so much to unpack here, but we will tell you every single detail about it next Wine Wednesday on another episode of Crime Over Wine.
Proud member of the Podnuga Network.